The fluorescent lights of Seoul General's emergency room cast harsh, unforgiving shadows across blood-splattered linoleum. The gunshot echoed in Naomi Adeyemi's memory as she pressed down on the dying man's chest, her dark brown fingers steady despite the tremor she felt crawling up her spine. The overhead lights buzzed like angry insects, making everything look sickly green. But her hands never wavered, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Stay with me!" She commanded in flawless Korean, her Nigerian accent barely detectable. The patient's eyes rolled back, his vitals crashing on the monitor, and Naomi felt that familiar cold dread pool in her stomach, the kind that made her jaw clench tight while her face remained calm. "Not today," she whispered, her voice steady even as adrenaline flooded her system. "Not on my watch." 2 hours later, the man was stable. Naomi stood in the locker room under different fluorescent lights, these ones flickering and tired, casting her exhausted reflection in strange angles. Blood covered her scrubs, dried now and flaking, and her hands finally shook with the aftermath of adrenaline. She stripped off the gloves, her fingers trembling so badly she had to ball them into fists to stop the shaking. Jiwon appeared with terrible coffee, her presence a warm contrast to the sterile coldness of the room. "You saved him," Jiwon said softly, her own exhaustion evident in the dark circles under her eyes. "That's the third impossible save this week. The newspapers are calling you the miracle of Seoul General." Naomi smiled tiredly, though the weight of what she'd just done sat heavy in her chest, pressing against her lungs. There are no miracles, just stubbornness and skill. And coffee. Lots of coffee. She took the cup, grateful for something to do with her still trembling hands. Outside in the parking lot, rain fell in sheets, turning the sodium vapor lights into golden halos against the darkness. Park Do-jin stood motionless, rain soaking through his expensive suit, each drop catching the light like liquid amber. His second-in-command, Byung-chul, held an umbrella that Do-jin ignored, his dark eyes fixed on the hospital's lit windows with an intensity that made his jaw ache from clenching. Through those windows, he could see her. The doctor who'd fought death with such fierce determination. She was beautiful in the harsh fluorescent glow, her dark skin luminous despite the unflattering light, her natural hair pulled into a practical bun that emphasized the elegant line of her neck. But it was more than beauty. It was the fire in her movements, the absolute refusal in every gesture to let death claim what was hers. Something stirred in Do-jin's body, sudden and shocking, a heat that spread through his abdomen and lower, making his breath catch. For 13 months since the car bombing, he'd been dead below the waist, broken in ways that made beautiful women turn away in pity. The humiliation had carved itself into his bones, made him colder, more ruthless. But now, just watching this stranger work, his body responded with devastating intensity, blood rushing places it hadn't gone in over a year. His hands clenched at his sides, knuckles white, the dragon tattooed across them seeming to writhe in the dim light. "Boss," Byung-chul tried carefully, concern evident in the way he shifted his weight. "Are you all right?" "Find out everything about her," Do-jin said quietly, his voice rough with an emotion he couldn't name. His chest felt tight, constricted, like someone had wrapped steel bands around his ribs. "Everything." Over the following 3 weeks, Do-jin became a ghost. He sat in his black sedan under the orange glow of streetlights, watching Naomi arrive for shifts in the pearl light of dawn, leave exhausted under the violet shadows of dusk, grab coffee from the cart bathed in golden afternoon sun. Each time he saw her, his body responded with that same shocking intensity, proof that he wasn't as broken as doctors had claimed. His men thought he was losing his mind. Sarah compiled her report under the blue light of computer screens, her face illuminated in strange angles. Dr. Naomi Adeyemi, 32, Nigerian, immigrated at 18, finished top of her class at Johns Hopkins, trauma surgery specialist. Works 70-hour weeks, colleagues worship her, patients call her an angel. She volunteers at free clinics. She's extraordinary, Sarah finished, studying her boss with worried eyes. And completely clean, no connection to our world. "Good," Do-jin said, his jaw tight. "Keep it that way." His fingers drummed against his thigh, the only external sign of the hunger burning in his chest. If you want to know what happens when a doctor catches the attention of a dangerous man, keep watching, because this story is about to get intense. The attack happened under the sickly yellow lights of the subway station at 2 a.m. Naomi descended the stairs, exhaustion making her movements slow, her earbuds blocking out the world. The station was nearly empty, harsh fluorescent tubes casting deep shadows between support pillars. She felt the shift before she saw them, that prickling awareness that made the hair on her arms stand up, her stomach dropping with sudden dread. 3 men materialized from shadow into light, one holding a knife that caught the fluorescence with a dull gleam. "Your bag," the leader demanded. Naomi's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat, taste it metallic and sharp, but her face remained calm, her voice steady despite the cold sweat breaking out between her shoulder blades. "I'm a doctor. There's nothing valuable except medical supplies. You don't want to do this." Her hands didn't shake even though her legs felt liquid, ready to run or fight depending on what came next. "We'll decide that," the leader sneered, stepping closer into a pool of harsh light that made his face look skeletal. Then a figure dropped from the upper platform, landing between them with predatory grace that made the air itself seem to shift. Park Dojin stood slowly under the fluorescent glare, and even in that unflattering light, he was terrifying. Shadows carved his face into harsh planes and angles, his eyes black and reflectionless. The tattoos crawling up his neck seemed alive in the flickering light, dragons and phoenixes locked in eternal combat. "Leave," he said simply, his voice soft as silk over steel. The thugs recognized him instantly, terror blanking their faces, making them stumble backward into shadow. "Mr. Park," the leader stammered, his knife suddenly trembling. "We didn't know she was yours." "She's not mine," Dojin corrected, his voice even softer, even more dangerous. The muscle in his jaw jumped, the only sign of the rage burning through him, making his hands want to form fists, want to break bones. "But you're Jade Serpent? And I've told your boss what happens to his men who operate in my territory. I'll give you 10 seconds. They fled into darkness, their footsteps echoing. Dojin turned to Naomi, and for the first time they stood face to face under the harsh station lights. Up close, bathed in that unforgiving fluorescence, he was even more imposing. Sharp features, a scar through his left eyebrow that caught the light, dark eyes that seemed to see everything, miss nothing. The tattoos were intricate artwork, beautiful and terrible. "Who are you?" Naomi demanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart, despite the way her hands wanted to shake. "Someone who was in the right place at the right time," Dojin said, his own hands clenched at his sides, fighting the urge to reach for her to confirm she was real. "You followed me." Not a question. "Observant," he admitted, his lips twitching almost into a smile. "Why?" He hesitated, searching for words, his chest tight with something between need and fear. "You saved someone important to me 3 weeks ago." "That gunshot victim? He worked for you." Dojin nodded, his throat working around words he couldn't quite say. "And I owe you a debt." Naomi studied him with clinical precision, her dark eyes taking in his expensive suit, dangerous demeanor, the tattoos that screamed organized crime. Her fingers tightened on her bag strap, the only outward sign of her nerves. "You're Yakuza? Triad? Korean?" he corrected, fighting to keep his breathing even as desire and something deeper churned in his gut. "We have our own organizations." "So a gangster," she said flatly. "Crime lord sounds more accurate." His honesty surprised even himself. "Well, Mr. Crime Lord, I don't want your gratitude or your protection. I save lives. That's my job. Your job puts you in danger." "From people like you," she shot back, and he saw the fire in her eyes, the absolute refusal to be intimidated. It made something in his chest crack open. "Those men were your enemies, which means your presence puts me in more danger, not less," she added. The logic was sound and cut him deeper than any blade, his jaw clenched, his hands opening and closing at his sides. "Have dinner with me." The words came out rougher than he intended. "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because you're a criminal, I'm a doctor, and this is insane." Her voice was steady, but he could see the pulse racing at her throat, could read the conflict in her eyes. "One dinner," he said, and then did something he never did. "Please." The word tasted foreign on his tongue, vulnerable, but he meant it with every fiber of his being. His chest felt like it might crack open, expose everything he usually kept buried. Naomi hesitated, her fingers drumming against her bag, a nervous gesture he recognized because his own hand wanted to do the same against his thigh. This dangerous man with his tattoos and reputation was asking, not demanding, and something in his eyes, something raw and unguarded, called to the healer in her. "One dinner," she heard herself say, wondering even as she said it if she was making a terrible mistake. "And then you disappear from my life." "Agreed," he said, relief flooding through him so intense it made his knees weak. "Tomorrow night? I work until 8. Then 8:30. There's a place in Hongdae. Traditional Korean food, quiet, private." "Fine, but I'm bringing pepper spray." "Fair enough." Dojin pulled out his phone, His hands finally steady now that she'd agreed. Give me your number. So you can track me? So I can send you the address. His voice softened, became almost human. And so you have mine, in case you need help. The next evening, warm lamplight filled Naomi's apartment, so different from the harsh hospital fluorescence, casting everything in golden amber tones. She stood before her closet, the setting sun through her window painting her skin in honey and bronze. Amara, her roommate, lounged on the bed, her silhouette backlit by that golden light. The red dress, Amara announced. Show him what he's dealing with. I shouldn't even be going, Naomi argued, but her hands were already reaching for the dress, her heart already racing. This man is dangerous. Girl, all the best men are dangerous. Besides, when was the last time you went on a date? Amara's voice was warm with affection and concern both. This isn't a date. It's reconnaissance. Know your enemy. Naomi chose the red dress, the fabric sliding over her skin like liquid crimson in the lamplight. She twisted her braids into an updo, her fingers trembling slightly, then applied minimal makeup in the bathroom's softer light that made her skin glow warm and alive. When the knock came at exactly 8:30, her stomach flipped, a physical sensation that made her press a hand to her abdomen. She opened the door to find Dojin bathed in the hallway's warm, incandescent glow and forgot how to breathe, her lungs seizing in her chest. He stood there in black slacks and a black button-down, the warm light catching the sharp planes of his face, making him look almost soft except for those dangerous eyes. His sleeves were rolled to reveal the full extent of his tattoos, intricate designs that seemed to move in the shifting light, dragons intertwined with phoenixes, and Korean characters flowing like water. His hair was styled back, emphasizing the scar through his eyebrow, that mark of violence somehow making him more beautiful. You're beautiful, he said simply, his voice rough, and she could see his pulse jumping at his throat, could read the tension in his shoulders. You're punctual, she replied, her own voice not quite steady, grabbing her clutch with fingers that wanted to tremble. The ride to Hongdae passed in comfortable silence, the city lights streaming past in ribbons of gold and crimson and electric blue. The restaurant sat tucked away from main streets, its exterior lit by soft paper lanterns that cast everything in warm, intimate amber. Inside was dimmer still, all warm wood and soft golden light from traditional lamps, shadows pooling in corners like secrets. The owner greeted Dojun with a deep bow that spoke of respect and fear both, his body language subservient in ways that made Naomi's stomach tighten with renewed awareness of exactly who she was with. They were led to a private room with sliding doors ensuring intimacy, and settled on cushions as food began arriving under the warm glow of a low-hanging lamp. Why am I here, Mr. Park? Naomi asked as tea was poured, the amber liquid catching light like honey. Dojin, please, he said, his hands steady on the teapot despite the tension she could read in his shoulders, in the tight line of his jaw. You're here because I wanted to apologize properly. For endangering me or stalking me? Both, he admitted, meeting her eyes in the lamplight, and she could see conflict there, vulnerability he usually kept hidden. And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since I watched you save that man's life. His jaw clenched, released. You were there? She asked. In the observation room. I followed the ambulance. The admission cost him something. She could see it in the way his fingers tightened on his cup. He took a bullet meant for you. Yes, and you felt guilty. Dojin nodded, the lamplight casting shadows that made his face look haunted. Guilt isn't an emotion I'm familiar with, Dr. Adeyemi. In my world, casualties are expected. But watching you fight for him, a stranger who associated with criminals with such determination, it affected me. His voice dropped lower, rougher. It woke something in me I thought was dead. Every patient matters, Naomi said firmly, leaning forward into the light, her dark skin glowing warm. I don't care if they're saints or sinners. When they're on my table, they're human beings who deserve to live. Even criminals? Especially criminals. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Her conviction was absolute, unwavering. Do you believe that? Dojin's eyes searched hers, his body leaning in despite himself. Or is that just something you tell yourself? I believe people can change, Naomi said carefully, her pulse visible at her throat, hammering. But they have to want to. Do you want to change, Dojin? The question hung heavy in the golden lamplight between them. Dojin set down his chopsticks, the small sound loud in the intimate space, and she watched his throat work as he swallowed, gathering courage. For 13 months, he said slowly, each word deliberate. I've been broken. The car bombing left damage the doctors said was permanent. Physical trauma combined with psychological barriers. They told me I'd never function as a man again. His hands clenched on the table, knuckles white, the dragons seeming to writhe. Naomi's medical mind engaged immediately, but it was her heart that responded to the pain in his voice, the shame he was trying so hard to hide. What kind of damage? Nerve damage from the explosion, complications from surgeries, psychological trauma that manifested physically. He couldn't meet her eyes now, staring at his clenched fists instead. Multiple specialists gave me the same prognosis. I accepted it, became colder, more ruthless. Figured if I couldn't be fully human, I'd be a more efficient monster. That's a terrible way to think about yourself, she said softly, and he finally looked up, surprised by the compassion in her voice. It's accurate. Dojin forced himself to meet her eyes, to let her see him completely. I've killed people, Dr. Adeyemi, not in self-defense, not accidentally. I've given orders that ended lives. 37 people by my own hand. His voice was flat, factual, but she could see the weight of it in his eyes, in the set of his shoulders. Hundreds more by my commands. I'm not a good man. Then why are you here? Her voice was gentle but firm, her eyes never leaving his. Why apologize? Why have dinner with a doctor who saves lives when you take them? Because watching you work, hearing your voice, even just being near you, something changed. His hands unclenched slowly, reaching across the table toward hers, but not quite touching, hovering in the warm light between them. For the first time in 13 months, my body responded. The doctors were wrong. I'm not broken, at least not completely. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, vulnerable in ways that made her chest ache. And I don't understand why, but you're the reason. Naomi's breath caught, her own hands trembling now as she reached to meet his halfway, their fingers finally touching in the lamplight. That's not how physiology works, she said, trying to cling to medical logic even as emotion flooded her. The psychological component is real, but it wasn't magic. Or maybe, Dojin said quietly, turning his hand to lace his fingers with hers, the touch electric. I needed a reason to fight for myself. And you gave me one. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, a gentle touch that made her pulse race, made heat pool low in her belly. The admission hung between them, raw and dangerous in the intimate golden light. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice not quite steady. Honestly, I don't know. His eyes searched hers, desperate and hopeful both. A chance, maybe. To see if this connection is real, to understand why you make me feel alive when I've been dead inside for so long. Before she could respond, Dojin's phone buzzed, the harsh modern sound jarring in the traditional space. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerable man disappearing behind the mask of the crime lord. His jaw went tight, his shoulders squared, and when he looked up, his eyes had gone cold and hard. What's wrong? Naomi asked, her stomach dropping with sudden dread. My warehouse was attacked. 3 of my men are dead. His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could see fury burning beneath the surface, could see it in the tension of his hands, the muscle jumping in his jaw. You need to go. Yes, I'm sorry. It's fine, she said, standing, her legs steadier than she expected. Go do what you need to do. Dojin stood too, studying her face in the lamplight, looking for fear and finding only understanding. You're not afraid. Should I be? Most people would be terrified right now. I spent my childhood in Lagos during political unrest, Naomi said calmly, though her heart raced in her chest. I've performed surgery during power outages with only flashlights. I've treated gunshot victims while their killers waited outside. Fear is useless. Action matters. Her pragmatism, her strength, made something in his chest swell. You're extraordinary. I'm practical, she corrected. Now go before more people die. As Dojin moved to leave, he caught her wrist, his touch gentle despite the violence humming through him. His thumb found her pulse, felt it racing, and his eyes softened. Be careful. If they know about you, they might come after you, he stated. Then maybe you should stay away from me. I don't think I can do that. The honesty in his voice, the naked need, made Naomi's breath catch. Then we're both in trouble. Yes, he agreed, his thumb still stroking her racing pulse. We are. The warehouse sat in industrial darkness, floodlights casting harsh white light over smoking ruins and bodies. Dojin arrived to find his men lying in pools of blood that looked black in the artificial light, their faces frozen in final moments of terror and pain. This wasn't sloppy work. This was surgical, professional, the kind of precision that made Dojin's jaw clench tight enough to ache. Byung-chul met him at the entrance, his face grim in the harsh floodlight, shadows carving deep lines of worry. Boss, this was military level. Clean shots, tactical entry, professional extraction. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Who? Dojin asked, his own voice deadly calm, the kind of calm that made his men nervous, that preceded violence. We don't know yet. But whoever they are, they knew exactly when to hit and how many men we had. Sarah appeared from inside, her tablet glowing blue-white in the darkness, making her face look ghostly. Boss, I found something. She showed him surveillance footage, the screen bright in the dim warehouse. A team of 6 men, faces covered, moving with practiced efficiency. But one paused to look directly at the camera, pulling down his mask briefly to reveal cold blue eyes and a snake tattoo on his neck. Viktor Kozlov, Dojin breathed, recognition making his hands form fists. Russian Bratva. What's he doing in Seoul? Sarah swiped to another image, her face tense. Building an empire. He's been here 2 months, quietly buying up territory, making alliances. And apparently he's decided you're in his way. Dojin's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping, his entire body vibrating with controlled rage. Find out everything. Where he sleeps, who he works with, what he wants. His voice was ice over steel, and double security on the doctor. Byung-chul frowned, concern evident in the way he shifted. Boss, she's not involved in this. She is now, Dojin said flatly, and they could all hear it, the finality, the claim. Kozlov is too smart not to have noticed my interest. If he thinks she's my weakness, he'll use her. 3 days passed in harsh fluorescent hospital lights and dark Seoul nights. Naomi noticed the security immediately, that prickling awareness that made her constantly check over her shoulder, made her muscles tense. The same guard always in the lobby under buzzing fluorescent lights. A black car always 3 vehicles behind her taxi, visible in her rearview mirror like a shadow. She told Jiwon over lunch in the cafeteria's unforgiving overhead lights that made the cheap food look even worse. He's protecting you, Jiwon said, picking at her rice. It's actually romantic. It's invasive, Naomi corrected, though part of her, the part that had felt safe walking home last night, disagreed. I'm being stalked by bodyguards. Better than being stalked by enemies. Jiwon's voice was serious now, her eyes meeting Naomi's with real worry. This is insane. My life is supposed to be about medicine, not gang wars. Naomi's frustration leaked through, making her voice tight. So tell him to back off. I tried. He won't answer my calls. And wasn't that the problem? The way her chest tightened when she thought about that, about him disappearing without a word. Jiwon studied her friend in the harsh cafeteria light. You like him? I do not. Naomi, you're a terrible liar. You like the dangerous gangster. Fine, Naomi admitted, her shoulders sagging. Maybe I do, but that doesn't make this okay. He can't just assign me security without asking. He can if he thinks you're in danger. Am I in danger? Naomi's voice dropped, fear making her stomach clench. Jiwon's expression turned serious, her hand reaching across the table. If he has enemies who know about you, yes, you absolutely are. The thought chilled Naomi to her bones, made her hands feel cold. Her phone buzzed, the vibration loud in the quiet moment between them. Unknown number. She answered, expecting Dojin, hope fluttering in her chest. Dr. Adeyemi, a voice said in accented Korean, cold as ice. My name is Viktor Kozlov. I believe we should talk about your boyfriend. Naomi's blood turned to ice, her free hand clenching on the table. He's not my boyfriend. No? Then you won't mind if something unfortunate happens to him. The casual cruelty in his voice made her stomach turn. Who is this? Someone who wants to make a deal. Meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Dongdaemun Design Plaza. Come alone. Tell Park and people die. His voice hardened. Including your pretty friend with short hair. What's her name? Dr. Baekjiwon? The line went dead. If you think Naomi should tell Dojin, comment below. But wait until you see what she decides to do next. Naomi sat frozen, terror flooding through her in cold waves that made her hands shake, made her vision narrow. Jiwon was watching her with growing alarm, reaching across the table. Naomi? What's wrong? Nothing, Naomi lied, the word tasting bitter. I have to go. She stood on legs that felt like water, her mind already racing with terrible possibilities. The next afternoon, pale winter sunlight filtered through the modern architecture of Dongdaemun Design Plaza, creating interesting shadows among the crowds of tourists and shoppers. Naomi stood in one of those shadows, her heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat, her hands clenched tight at her sides. She spotted Viktor immediately, his tall frame catching the filtered sunlight, cold blue eyes finding her like a predator spotting prey. Dr. Adeyemi, he greeted in English, his accent thick, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Thank you for coming." "What do you want?" Naomi asked, keeping her voice steady despite the fear making her stomach clench, despite the cold sweat between her shoulder blades. "To give you a warning." He stepped closer, into a shaft of pale sunlight that made his snake tattoo stand out starkly. "Park Dojin is dangerous. He's killed dozens of people, built his empire on blood and suffering. I'm aware of what he is." Her chin came up, her hands unclenching, preparing to fight if needed. "Are you?" Victor's expression was almost kind, which somehow made it worse. "Because from where I stand, you're a good woman making a terrible mistake." "If this is your pitch to get me to betray him," she started, but he cut her off. "I want you to walk away." His voice softened, became almost sincere. "You're a doctor, a good person. You don't belong in his world. Leave Seoul. I'll make sure you're safe." "And if I don't?" Naomi asked, though she already knew, her body already tensing for the answer. "Then you'll be caught in the crossfire when I destroy him." Victor's eyes went hard as stone. "I'd rather not kill an innocent woman, but I will if necessary." "You're threatening me to save me?" Naomi's voice dripped with disbelief. "That's twisted logic." "That's survival," Victor said simply, handing her a business card, his fingers cold when they touched hers. 48 hours. Think about it." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Naomi standing in pale sunlight, shaking with fear and rage both, her hands trembling so badly she had to shove them in her pockets. What she didn't know was that Dojin's security detail had followed her, professional and invisible. What she didn't know was that Dojin himself watched from a nearby rooftop through binoculars, and seeing Victor approach her filled him with such murderous rage that made every muscle in his body lock tight, his jaw clenching so hard he tasted blood. Byung-chul physically restrained him, hands on his shoulders, feeling the violence humming through his boss's body. "She went to him," Byung-chul said carefully, his voice low and soothing. "We should find out why." Dojin's hands were white-knuckled on the binoculars, his entire body vibrating with the need to move, to act, to destroy. "Take me to her apartment, now." His voice was deadly quiet. "Boss, maybe we should wait." Byung-chul tried, but one look at Dojin's face, at the cold fury there, and he fell silent. "Now," Dojin repeated. When Naomi returned home that evening, the apartment was dim. Only one lamp lit, casting long shadows across her living room. Dojin sat on her couch like a shadow given form, his face half in darkness, and when he stood, the movement was predatory, controlled violence barely leashed. Amara was conspicuously absent, probably warned away. "You met with Kozlov," he said quietly, his voice deadly calm, the kind of calm before storms. "How did you—" Naomi started, but he cut her off. "I have people watching you." His jaw clenched, released. "What did he want?" "To warn me about you, to tell me I should leave Seoul." "And you believed him?" Dojin moved closer, into the lamplight, and she could see fury burning in his dark eyes, could see it in every tense line of his body. "I don't know what to believe anymore," Naomi said, and suddenly all her fear and exhaustion bubbled over, making her voice crack. "My life was simple before you. I saved lives, went home, was safe. Now I have Russian mobsters threatening me, bodyguards I didn't ask for, and a crime lord sitting in my apartment." Her hands shook, her chest tight with unshed tears. "I'm protecting you," Dojin growled, closing the distance between them, his body radiating heat and fury both. "From dangers you brought into my life," Naomi shot back, her own anger rising to meet his, her hands forming fists. She was tired of being afraid, tired of being careful. "Yes," Dojin admitted, and the words seemed to cost him everything. His shoulders sagged slightly, some of the fury bleeding out. "Yes, I brought this to you, and I'm sorry for that, but I can't stay away from you, Naomi." His voice dropped, became rough with emotion. "I've tried. God knows I've tried. What would you do if you were Naomi? Accept him? Or walk away? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell so you won't miss episode 2, where love and danger collide even deeper.